You're listening to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast, episode number 18. We're talking today with Matt Mcintyre of Brackets for Good, who will be sharing about the nonprofit digital divide, building bridges, and seeing social media as a leadership opportunity. I also wanted to take a quick minute to mention a telesummit that I'm hosting this week, March 2nd through 4th. You can visit nonprofitleadersnetwork.com/spring 2016 to hear more about the speakers and to register for this free event.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast, where your host, KIRSTEN Bullock, interviews nonprofit CEOs and executive directors to share what's working. This podcast is produced every 2 weeks, and show notes are found at www.nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Come back often, and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. Any links we talk about will be listed in the show notes. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hi, I'm here today with Matt Mcintyre, who's a self-described philanthropic tech marketer who strives to have the biggest impact on the most people possible. His innovative approach to nonprofit fundraising is bringing that goal to life in a big way. So I'm really happy to have Matt here with me today. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirsten. Thrilled to be here and thrilled to be on the show today.
Fantastic. Well, to help us get started, would you mind sharing a few words about Brackets for Good, especially for those who might not be familiar with what you do?
Yeah, just a few might be tough, but I'll do my best. So Brackets for Good is a online fundraising tournament where local nonprofits compete against one another to out-fundraise each other, advance through a bracket-style tournament. So they're competing head-to-head, round by round. They advance through this tournament. They're gaining more dollars, more awareness, new donors, and the winning organization has a chance to receive a $10,000 grand prize from a very generous corporate sponsor.
Fantastic. And you are registered as a charitable organization yourself.
Yeah, that's right. So we do this all as a 501c3 ourselves. It's very important to us for quite a few reasons. And the biggest one is definitely we want to be as transparent as possible. I think that if you look at the history of charity challenges out there, those that have been ran by big brands, let's call it Chase, Target, Pepsi, there's several out there. They fail primarily, they fail for a few reasons, but they fail primarily because they look at themselves first as list building tools, right? So click to vote for your favorite charity and we're going to email you about the latest toilet paper deal the following week, or the next whatever it might be. And the second thing is, there's also not a very strong local play there. I mean, I think we're all very aware that philanthropy is local and those who support us are mostly local. And so when we're able to do that and participate in a way that's not list building and participate and allow corporate sponsors to participate in a way that's what I call mediated corporate philanthropy, where our sponsors, and it's helpful to know that Brackets for Good, we're about a 90% sponsor funded 501c3. So when our sponsors essentially give to us, they're essentially hiring us to operate these fundraising tournaments in their communities. I mean, they're big corporate citizens. They don't have the bandwidth to operate something that has a big mass appeal and a large impact on the philanthropic sector. So we plug ourselves in to do exactly that. And so what we're doing is, the reason it's mediated corporate philanthropy is there is no list building. So none of our sponsors get anyone's information. They're not doing anything to follow up or accordingly. This is a truly a non-toxic approach to corporate philanthropy.
Great. And being that it's not a list building opportunity for them, it is still a brand building opportunity.
Oh, certainly. I think the brand goodwill is something we should all gravitate to. I mean, I read a statistic recently saying that companies have far more reach than any nonprofit, so we can leverage that for the betterment of our organizations. I think that there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know corporations, too, they've, at least in some research I read, they found that millennials especially really like to work for companies that are doing good in the community. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the two biggest drivers of CSR programs today are employee attraction and employee retention. So, attraction when that millennial shows up as an interview, and retention when you need that team building exercise, or the idea that, hey, my company is supporting my cause in this way. I think those are the two biggest underlying motivations of CSR programs today. Whether good or bad, I don't know. I just think those are the two that exist.
Okay. And how did you first get the idea for Brackets for Good? And it's been around for several years, and I think, if I remember right, it was around for several years before you put together the 501c3 and really formalized it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we Brackets for Good started in 2012, operated as a volunteer-run organization for 3 years. Was a 501c3 the entire time, but never paid a single staffer. And so the story's pretty great how this whole thing started. And it started after watching a local school to Indianapolis College, Butler University, make it to back-to-back Final Four championships. When Butler did this, living in Indianapolis, it was amazing to watch the city gravitate towards this school. And it was, the city was bleeding blue and white. It wasn't for the Indianapolis Colts, and it was an amazing thing to be a part of. And at the time, watching the city do this, it was like, okay, well, what's going on here? This small school is rising to these heights. This spotlight is being put onto them because of what they were able to do in this tournament. No one knew about them before this. And so at the time, this was before this was when the philanthropic bug bit me. I was doing some marketing consulting and said, what could we do to leverage this same kind of energy for the betterment of the community? And one of the co-founders and I said, all right, let's create a college pick'em bracket style tournament that everyone does in their office. And we'll give the money that you pay to participate back to a local charitable organization. And we said, cool, that sounds good. Let's do that. We said, great. Well, how many nonprofits can we think of? And we thought of four, in our own backyard, 4 different charities. And they're the ones with the biggest budgets, the biggest marketing dollars, and the ones that got in front of us as young professionals. So at this time of our lives, we were young professionals, values were maturing, disposable incomes were maturing, and we could only think of 4 different options to give back to. And we said, that's the problem. The problem is discovering a nonprofit isn't easy and fun and doesn't come with a low barrier of entry. So we set out to solve that problem with this idea of marrying sport and philanthropy in a way that has a low barrier of entry, right? Scoring $1, donating $1 to score 1 point is one thing. And then the flip side of that is it's not giving up a Saturday. This is truly a way it's an on-ramp for philanthropy, right? It's a way to be philanthropically equipped in your younger years to, develop a relationship that really makes sense moving forward. And so we've the underlying tone of nonprofit discovery has been in our back of our minds the whole time. And we stay true to it even today, where yes, our tournaments host 64 local nonprofits, but each division within that bracket, so there's 16 organizations in a division, is representative of the organizational size. So you don't have the big behemoth organization going against, the tiny guy. You truly have like-sized organizations competing against one another, and it does a few things. Not only does it bring discovery to donors, nonprofits, and, companies that are local, but it also, allows them to learn a lot about each other that, qualitatively formed new relationships, new bonds, new programs get built, all this stuff, because it's not fun to learn about those right now. And we're trying to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm. And make it, like you said, fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
There are so many organizations that I've talked to over the years, and they say that they're the best kept secret in town. And so it sounds like you're really trying to help organizations get beyond that. With your background in marketing, I would imagine that you would have a lot of ideas for ways that people could move beyond that. Would you mind sharing anything that might come to mind?
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is correct. And I think it's funny that, I mean, do they want to continue being the best kept secret, or do they really want to grow and solve their
Good
mission?
question.
I mean, you know, as a nonprofit leader, we're all kidding ourselves if our day-to-day goal isn't to work ourselves out of a job. I mean, that's the idea, right? We set out to solve this problem, we solve the problem, and then we no longer have a job. I mean, that's the goal. So, you know, when I looked at the sector at my age and in my capacity and what I could participate in, I just realized that, you know, discovery was the first problem. So setting off to solve that, right? You want to help these organizations that don't have the resources be discovered. And because everyone's values are aligned to their personal, you know, their personal circumstances. And so in doing that, we need to make it easy and fun. And then the second layer of that I think is becoming more and more apparent in Brackets for Good, especially as we grow, is just, you know, helping nonprofits with their online fundraising capacity. You know, it's unusual to find a nonprofit that has dedicated efforts towards what I call digital development, right? So this idea that there's an individual dedicated to the growth of the organization online. And so with Brackets for Good, when we require all donations to come online and and equip these organizations with a ton of tools, everything from sample social media posts to signature marketing tools to our own Google AdWords engine we built in behind the scenes to help them demystify measuring their digital marketing efforts. All of that stuff is helping equip them to further the mission well beyond Brackets for Good. And I think the last thing is another problem we've discovered is there's this, you know, we're familiar with the digital divide when it comes to someone in a low-income house that doesn't have access to the internet. But there's truly a nonprofit digital divide where current leaders of nonprofit organizations haven't grown up with, been equipped with the tools and the tricks of the trade that they need to be successful online. So, you know, unfortunately, those best kept secrets, and my gut reaction is they're probably not online, and they're probably not marketing to the new up and coming leaders in their community that need to know about them. And they're not leveraging these tools that, yes, there are a million of them, but if we can be not a clearinghouse, but if we can help organizations navigate what's best for them, then we can equip them to be successful in this space that's, you know, frankly, somewhat scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, anytime you try to start something new, it can be really scary.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And for a lot of the nonprofits, smaller ones especially, I know they struggle with it. Do you have any recommendations for a first step that an organization might take to start trying to overcome that digital divide?
Yeah, good question. Great question, actually. And I think, you know, the first thing is they have to see what tools are available to them, right? I mean, and what I mean by that is not when I Google something, what's available, but what's truly accessible. You know, what could you become a part of? You know, is it as simple as your website? Is it as simple as an email to, a standard email newsletter to your board or to your volunteers or to your beneficiaries? You know, what does it look like for you to start doing something today that can be a good stepping stone in? So I guess the advice overall is do not go into everything all at once. And as you dip your toes in, you'll certainly see some success. Let me give you a real example. We had an organization participate in Brackets for Good that literally had zero, I think it was specifically, they had zero social media, but they had zero Twitter followers. After participating in Brackets for Good, they had so many that the national chapter of that organization asked the individual running the local chapter to come run the marketing group for the organization nationally. So all that she did was participate, right? She just tried it and she found comfort in it. And what the organization realized was, you know, this is a one-to-many reach that we need to be a part of or we're going to get lost and be the next best kept secret.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned millennials earlier, and sometimes, and the next generation who's coming up, certainly, but sometimes in the nonprofit sector, there's this thought that they're going to help millennials get connected by asking them to do social media for them. Do you think that's the best way to proceed with that, to bring somebody in, or is there a different way that you might recommend?
Yeah, it's so hard, right? It's funny that social media defaults to the intern task or the volunteer task. But in the same regard, I almost look at it like if you were that same organization, and let's say you had a banquet dinner and you were about to get up on the podium, and instead of getting up on the podium and addressing the crowd, you asked one of your interns to do it. Maybe it doesn't carry that same weight, but the facts are the same, where you're broadcasting a message to many people about your organization that you care so much about, but yet you don't care enough about this medium that is so popular among this younger audience that you're allowing someone to do it that doesn't, it's not that they're bad at it. It just that means that they don't have as much experience with it and experience in talking about the organization and how good it's doing and telling a story. So my recommendation is, I'm certain there probably is a better task for that volunteer, intern, et cetera, that's just going to plug in and plug out, where you yourself could learn, spend that new time learning this new tool that's going to better the organization longer term. Right.
And it is amazing how easy it is to pick up a new tool. If you're just concentrating on one, you spend some time learning it. It doesn't need to be a big time-consuming activity.
Yeah, no, and it's and it should be fun. I mean, it's just a new way to communicate. I mean, if I had to count the times that you're so gracious to be, or so grateful to be asked to come into this venue, this opportunity to tell your story, every nonprofit clamors for that opportunity, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a lunch and learn with 6 people or if it's a giant banquet dinner. So there's no difference between that and the social platform as well. I mean, people want the story. You got to tell them the story and make sure they understand it.
Absolutely. Now, this is one of my favorite questions. Often failures can make the best learning experiences. Would you mind sharing with us a failure that you've experienced, whether through launching this venture or bringing nonprofits on board? What you learned from it, and yeah. I think failure is a daily part of life, right? So one of the best terms I've heard recently that I've claimed for myself is a philanthropreneur, right? So someone who is an entrepreneur in philanthropy, and I think with any entrepreneurship venture, literally the good and bad of your day is not measured by the day, but measured rather by the half an hour. So, you could have a great morning and not a great 8:30, but a great 9:30. And so with that, I think it's something you roll with the punches. And specifically, zooming way back to Brackets for Good early days, we kind of, I think we were ahead of the curve in some aspects. So I think what we failed to do early on was embrace this sector that we didn't quite know about. I mean, all of us, the 3 co-founders of Brackets for Good did not come from a philanthropy background. We were marketers, web developers, designers. We kind of say we like to say we pioneered this idea of skill-based volunteering early on. But I think in doing that, we all knew what was best from the business, like a for-profit business, even enterprise type organization. And specifically, we required organizations to take this login step with us in the early days of seeking those to participate. And it was specifically through social media where you had to log in using your Facebook or Twitter account. And granted, this was in 2012, so not a lot of people knew what was going on. And everyone was terrified to do it. And in reality, it's actually a safer way because you're not storing a password anywhere. It's actually a safer way to log in. But convincing this group to do that was next to impossible. And so we pulled back from that and had to rethink sort of this login step of this feature. And I've since navigated that as such. But the idea, I think the biggest idea that we learned was we need to be respectful of what's out there. And, we can't come in guns blazing and think we know it all, because we certainly don't. So an example of us putting that lesson into practice is Brackets for Good is
in the Twin Cities, so Minneapolis, St. Paul. And Minneapolis and St. Paul is very well known for its Give to the Max Day, the single day of giving put on by an organization called NLN18. And we knew that we're bringing a charity challenge in. It's at a different time of year, but there might be some hard feelings about this. So we went straight to them, approached them, and said, guys, here's what we're doing. We'd love to be in this thing together. And I mean, they couldn't have been more welcoming is the right word. Couldn't have been more welcoming to us and to the Brackets for Good organization, because ultimately their mission was to increase philanthropic giving in the state of Minnesota, regardless if it's their program or not. So their excitement for us was something that we probably would have shied away from in the early days, thinking there might be some competitive nature or turf war type stuff here. But since being there, they couldn't be a better partner, and we couldn't be more well equipped to help each other be successful in both of our initiatives.
Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to bet that your being upfront and going to them at the beginning probably helped to pave the way for a good, positive relationship there.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Mm-hmm. So the old phrase of it's sometimes better to ask forgiveness than permission is perhaps not the best advice at times.
Not in this sector, I don't think. I think, I think there's I think turf war is the best term for a nonprofit community, right? It's kind of this old hat way of saying, well, we can't be doing this together because it just doesn't make sense. But in reality, we're not going to solve these problems we've set out to solve unless we can figure out how to do some of them together. And, we may not even figure it out then, but at least we're going to get a little bit closer. So my hope is that, any leader listening to this listening to us today says, you know what, there probably are 10 other organizations that I don't know about in my backyard that might have a similar program or initiative as me. Maybe we could link arms, and maybe, just maybe, we could have a bigger impact on this community that we're both trying to serve.
Absolutely. Now, with Brackets for Good, you're currently in 5 markets.
That's correct.
So what are those markets?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Indianapolis, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, St. Louis, Missouri, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the Twin Cities in Minnesota, so Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Are there any particular cities you're looking forward to moving into next year, or what's your growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we probably have organizations registered with us in 35 different states. And all of those have said, bring Brackets for Good here. And we're really saying we would absolutely love to. And so our recipe for expansion has always been finding that presenting sponsor. So that presenting sponsor in our eyes is funding both the $10,000 grant for the winner and part of our operations to come there. Once we have that, we run with the rest and certainly operate accordingly. But cities on the map right now, really close, are Chicago, Raleigh-Durham area, North Carolina, as you can imagine, the basketball country. Let's see, New York's on the list, LA's on the list, and I think those are some of the top ones. But certainly there's been several that have reached out everywhere from, had a few in Canada, in fact. We've had some in San Francisco, Seattle, Atlanta, all over. So we're excited to continue to grow.
Well, great. I look forward to having you come back on the show in a few years and help share advice about scaling up and having a greater impact.
I would love
doing
to.
that. Okay. Well, do you have any closing words of advice or encouragement for our listeners?
Yeah, I do. I hope the listeners today at least thought about something a little differently and thought, maybe I should consider this digital development. Maybe it's not a role, but maybe it's an additional function of somebody on the team. And I think you've got to invest in your brand, right? I know that's an old hat marketing terminology, but when it comes to nonprofits, people gravitate to, discover, and learn more about something that really appeals to them. And when I say invest in your brand, I mean both visually, but moreover, just your awareness and your outwardly communication. So just don't hesitate. Don't be the best kept secret anymore overall. That's the biggest advice.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today.
You're so welcome. Thank you again.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, thank you for everything you do to make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast with Kirsten Bullock. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, nonprofitleadersnetwork.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. Join us next time for another edition of the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast.